And how much Bitcoin is actually available out there in the world?
So I'd have to look that up. I would say about 11 million or so have been created so far.
And there's a constant creation of these. And
Every 10 minutes, 25.
And this constant creation will eventually not just level off, but one day stop.
Yes.
Now, what happens then?
Well, the thing is, it starts operating more like a precious metal, which is that, once supply of a precious metal gets restricted, it increases in value.
Mm-hmm.
But the one difference is that a precious metal, you can only shave so thin. You can't cut it into smaller units, and it's difficult to transport and all of that. Whereas Bitcoin, you can divide it into 100 million subunits. So basically, instead of the money in your pocket losing value over time because the central government is diluting it, it's getting concentrated because more people want to use it and there's not enough around. So it gains value in your pocket. And that's a deflationary currency. It creates some interesting savings opportunities.
Where do you see this going? What do you see like the future in 100 years from now? What do you think Bitcoin's place in the world is going to be?
I think I can make certain predictions for sure. And I can make other predictions with absolute 90% margin, which means I'm pulling it out of my ass. So let me tell you one I can make for sure. Cryptocurrencies will be part of our financial future, period. Doesn't matter what form they take. This invention has been invented. It will change finance. It will change banking. And it might not be Bitcoin. I think it will, but it might not be Bitcoin, but it will still be a cryptocurrency. The idea of having a mathematical currency based on a distributed peer-to-peer network happened. The invention happened. You can't stop people from coming up with variations of it. You can't easily shut it down. If you shut down one, 100 others are going to pop up in its place. Now, at the same time, I think Bitcoin has a very good chance of being the one that was good enough, that grew fast enough, and gained enough traction that it will actually have, as a store of value for a very long time.
Now, didn't someone sell a house in Canada through Bitcoin?
We've seen transactions as big as $150 million. By the way, guess what the fee was?
What?
0.
Whoa. 150 million?
Transferred in seconds for 0 fee.
Well, who got $150 million in Bitcoin? Justin Bieber, that crazy fuck. Who did that? Were they drunk?
We have no idea.
Oh, they must have been drunk as fuck.
We don't know. I mean, you
looked
see,
at their phone. What? Look at the text messages you made when you were drunk, and then look at your Bitcoin folder. I did what?
You'd think you would know if somebody spent that much money using Bitcoin because they would, as a Bitcoin user, would probably scream, "I just spent $1.5 million." That's why it's so weird for me to think that like the guy that created it, no one knows what he looks like. Some guys spent $1.5 million, but no one knows who this guy. It just seems so.
Well,
weird
I mean,
to me.
here's the thing: you don't know what's happening in the banking system today. People are sending billions of dollars around.
Yeah, but for Bitcoin users, it's almost like buying a cell phone and you're advertising like, "This is the best cell phone ever. I love it." That your cell phone sucks because they're almost the most vocal about using Bitcoin. That you would think somebody that's going to spend 1.5 would immediately go to online, and just.
What do you mean? Hold on.
Well, and tell the world I have all this money and I'm spending it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a dangerous thing to say.
Why would you think that that's what they would do? And if they didn't do that, it wouldn't be real.
No, I didn't say it's not real. I just says it seems so suspicious that that there's so many. See, my biggest problem because people have been trying to get me to go on Bitcoin for the longest time is things like this where it just seems there's so much mystery to it. Like especially if you follow the conspiracies of the guy that created it, and you hear reports like somebody just spent all these millions of dollars using Bitcoin, but yet
that's not what he said. He said someone bought $1.5 million worth of Bitcoin.
No. Someone
transferred it into $1.5 million.
There was a transaction from one address to another address for $150 million in a single transaction. Keep in mind,
wait a minute, $150 million?
Yes, and these happen every second. Not that big, but transactions happen all the time. And so if you were watching the stream and transaction, you're like, $10, $1,000, $500, $10,000, $150 million. You're like, what? Well, and you can see that transaction because it's on the public ledger and it did happen and it has been verified and the transaction went through and they paid 0 fee.
So this $150 million transaction was between two people.
It was between two addresses. It might have been person moving it from one of their own accounts to one of their own accounts or giving it to someone else.
But it's still $150 million American dollars worth of
It was
Bitcoin.
about 146,000, 145,000 Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin's worth $800 each?
Yeah. So at the time, it was almost 1,000. So yeah, it's about 150 million.
Wow.
Which, in the big scheme of things, by the way, in the global monetary system, is peanuts.
But it's not
but
if it's
for
an
Bitcoin,
individual
it's not.
user, though. If it's either an individual or is it a corporation?
Might be a
Government.
corporation, might be the government.
Yeah, when we seized Silk Road, the government, meaning we, who
You're
the
working for the government, man.
the government kept that, right?
They're actually. I don't think they want to keep it for too long, and I'm not sure they're allowed by law to keep it for too long. So what they've announced they're going to do is they're going to sell it.
They're going to sell Silk Road?
They're
the
going to
money.
sell the bitcoins they seized,
Oh.
Silk Road.
So
and they're going to sell them on some kind of market or auction, which is great because it's going to create some discount opportunities.
Well, that's funny. So Bitcoin was a key player in that whole Silk Road scandal. And for folks who don't know what Silk Road was, it was a website that allowed you to buy a lot of illegal things online, and some of it was purchased through Bitcoin. And those things were as illegal as drugs or as guns. There was a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, it was mostly drugs, and the just today, 53 minutes ago, or whatever, and I don't know, the guy that those two people got arrested for that from they had a company that was laundering money using bitcoins
Allegedly
yeah,
selling Bitcoin
definitely.
to someone who
Right.
sold Bitcoin to users who bought drugs.
Right.
This is not exactly money laundering for drugs. Let's be clear. The
Yeah.
allegation, I read the indictment on the plane, and I'm not a lawyer, but what it said is that allegedly these people sold Bitcoin to someone who then resold it on the Silk Road to other users, some of whom used it to buy drugs.
So how could someone be responsible for...
That's a
That's
that's a 3-hop allegation, and in my mind, if that's the standard, then at least half of Wall Street should be in cuffs, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing, it's allegedly, so let's keep
Right,
that
yeah,
in there.
definitely.
I mean,
Yeah, we've used many allegedlys. It's very important.
well, there's a lot of exaggerated claims and statements in prosecution indictments. When you're a career prosecutor and you write up the indictment and decide to take it to the grand jury, you're not going to just write the littlest thing you do. You're going to make it look like every person you arrest is the worst person in the world and has massive crimes going on.
Yeah,
Which means that reading that and seeing how much of a weak case it is, allegedly sold to someone who allegedly sold to users who allegedly bought drugs. I don't know.
It seems insane. It's almost like your employee buys drugs with money that you paid him, so you are in trouble for him buying drugs.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to figure out
It's
exactly they're going, but
direct sort of connection, the same direct sort of connection.
let's see them try and prove it. I mean, that's
so
the
scary,
justice system. You have to prove it.
Yeah, but it's so scary that someone's freedom is on the line for something as ambiguous as that, especially when you're dealing with someone selling Bitcoin to someone who used that Bitcoin to buy drugs. Once it's out of your hands.
What's scary is that you've got a
allegedly.
24-year-old sitting in jail for this, and you've got the 55-year-old CEO of HSBC who didn't even resign after being fined hundreds of millions of dollars for laundering billions.
Yeah. What the fuck, government? Don't make us use the internet to run everything. That's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually probably owned by the government, and they're going to use it in voting in the future. And like you said, that's probably going to be.
So here's the thing: it doesn't matter if it's owned by the government. Look,
Right.
listen,
Well,
the
they might
government
control it.
the government invented the basic protocols behind the internet, and then engineers and geeks took it and turned it into a global network. And even if the government had invented the math behind Bitcoin, we know how it works. It's math, and we're using it to do things that the government doesn't necessarily control that well. So if they did invent it, that was a bad idea on someone's
As it
part.
was the internet. The
But
internet was
the
a bad
whole
idea for
point
them
is
as
that the
well.
underlying technology, there's nothing mysterious about it. You can read the source code, you can see how it works, you can understand how it works, and you're not trusting anyone specific. You're just trusting that you understand how it works. And it's math. I mean, that's the beauty of it, and that's why people are adopting it so easily, is because there's no one behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's sexy. It's the new kid on the block. It's the new exciting thing. It's the as you said, the internet of money.
Yeah.
And people want to be the first adopters. They want to get on it first. That
Yeah,
massive
what else is happening
fluctuation-
in this economy? I mean, really, let's think about it. What else is happening in this economy?
Not so
Other
good
than the
things.
military, other than more derivatives piled on top of more derivatives by the banks, pretty much everything else is at a standstill.
Except marijuana. The money from marijuana.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing in this economy that's exploded in the places where it's been introduced and allowed to operate in the free market. And ironically, the situation there was that they weren't letting those people who were selling the marijuana put their money in banks. The government has since amended that and said that they are going to now start allowing these people who run these medical marijuana stores to put their money in banks, which is a huge victory. And I think, ultimately, it's unconscionable to do anything else because you're allowing an environment where violent crime is most likely going to take place because you are making people targets. If you're not allowing them to bank, you're making sure they have massive amounts of cash on them on a regular basis, and they're going to get targeted. It's just a matter of time. You're going to create victims of violent crime. So I'm glad they decided to not do that. But it's a perfect example of the kind of fuckery that's involved in our government, that you could have these people that did pass a law allowing something to be legal, and yet still those people are kept from and prohibited from putting that money in banks. It's nuts. It's madness.
I mean, the broader scheme of this is understanding that there's ways to deal this through law, including the people's propositions in these states. And then there's a lot of these extra legal, shenanigans that happen where suddenly someone gets audited for a dozen years in a row, right?
Yeah.
And J. Edgar Hoover had people audited every year of their life because he didn't like them.
Yeah.
And some of those practices, continue to this day. Now, I would
Proven.
at least like to see the rules followed. I mean, that's the whole point of this country, isn't it? It's a rule of law equally applied to all. At least if we know what the rules are, you can follow them or choose not to and then face the consequences. But if you don't even know what the rules are because people make them up as they go along, that's not a good place to live.
Yeah, if a private business, acted the way the IRS did as far as like handing out audits to people that were political opponents, handing out audits to people that were personal opponents of people that were in power, if a private company acted out that way, they would be guilty of all sorts of fucking violations. There'd probably be somebody in jail. I mean, it would be a really big issue if you found out. But they've been auditing people just to fuck with them for the longest time. It's a pretty gross and scary thing.
Well, the good news is they're not auditing Bitcoiners, and so far we have a nice relationship with the IRS, and they're looking for ways to help us pay our taxes. And I'm looking forward to that time. I'm looking forward to filing my taxes and paying them this year.
I'm fascinated by that.
I mean, I pay them every year. It's just
Right.
paying taxes specifically for the Bitcoin earnings I've had this year.
I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see that.